joining us today and hope you have an enriching experience with us. So today we have Ms. Kanika Dhingra, who is working as an assistant professor at National Law University, Jodhpur. She has done her graduation in law from Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies, GGS IPU, Delhi, and master's from National Law University, Jodhpur. She is also pursuing her PhD in the area of patent laws. She has also been a guest faculty at Footwear Design and Development Institute, Jodhpur, for the past 2 years. And she has her papers published in academic journals and also presented a few papers in national as well as international conferences. Her area of interest include intellectual property rights, cyber laws, and women in laws. Today, she would be speaking on the emerging dispute settlement mechanisms for intellectual property disputes, and I'm sure we all are eager for the webinar to start. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Before I start, I would just want to ask if I can share a PPT that I have. And if yes, how do I do so? I don't see a share button here. Share screen is there. Is that how I do it?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So is this visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So the topic that I'm taking up today, as has been suggested by ma'am, this is emerging dispute settlement mechanisms for IP disputes. Now, to understand the emerging dispute settlement mechanisms, we first need to be aware of what are the existing and so far used settlement mechanisms that we have already in place. So I would first begin with simply talking about what are the types of IP disputes that we have. Now, as we look at intellectual property, the primary thing that we have to appreciate is that intellectual properties are basically rights that you have by virtue of operation of a certain statute that explicitly recognizes this right, and you obtain the rights through a certain procedure that is prescribed therein. So it's not that you would have had a patent had there not been a patent law. Any invention would have simply been a happiness factor for you, but not as such in the sense of the commercial terms that you get the right to economically exploit it. So the existence of these intellectual property laws, they basically give you the right such that you enjoy an exclusive position in the market. So therefore, the primary thing that we have to appreciate is that these are rights that you get through a statute. And they are largely for the economic and commercial advantages that one enjoys over the others in the market. So this basically gives you an edge. Now, one thing already discussed, that these are rights given to you through a statute, through a certain procedure. It obviously gives you a monopoly in a sense that for a certain fixed duration of time, as is prescribed through the statute, you would have the economic rights to commercially exploit your IP. For example, when you have a trademark registered in your name, only you would be entitled to use that trademark per se. And others in the market who try and copy your trademark, you have the entitlement or the privilege to stop them. So this is how intellectual property simply work. Now, when you have such a right with you, there are obviously chances of these rights being breached. And this may be simply from a person whom you've never known. That is why you call these people infringers. And you sue them for having taken an advantage of the registration that you have in place for yourself. So disputes may arise with people whom you do not know at all in the first place, or disputes may even arise with people whom you know, and let's say you also have a contractual relationship with them, such as something that simply arises out of a very, very simple thing used in intellectual property rights, which is a license. For example, I have a certain intellectual property with me, but I may not necessarily be wanting to commercialize it, or I may not have the potential to commercialize it. So I may transfer this right to someone else in the form of my licensee, who would then start commercially exploiting this intellectual property. Also, this may happen when I want a larger coverage in the market, where I myself cannot reach, so I license out my IP to someone else. So this is how you may have disputes with unknown people, or you may have disputes with known people. And these disputes, they generally arise in certain examples that I have for you. For example, disputes simply relating to infringement or passing off. Disputes arising out of agreements such as simple licenses. Disputes or issues concerning market competition also. and disputes relating to SEPs particularly, which are of great relevance in present times. So if you look at the second last bullet here, which is visible to you through the PPT, disputes or issues concerning market competitions are a very new and a different kind of a dispute. Now you have the intellectual property laws from as early as, let's say you have the Patents Act, which is right now in place from 1970, but we've had a patent law governing something like market exclusivity from late 1880s or something. Therefore, I say that these concerns are new because we have something known as the Competition Act that has come up in 2002. Now this takes care of market competition, and this law is apparently the indirect conflict with what we have in intellectual properties. So on one hand, you're saying that we will give you monopoly. On the other hand, through competition regime, you're saying we will not let you exclusively exploit this monopoly. So this is basically a system of checks and balances, and rather a harmony has been drawn between the two laws. So we cannot simply say that this is a conflicting law. To an extent, it embarges upon the intellectual property rights. However, it does allow you to enjoy your intellectual property rights in a reasonable manner, right? So this is something that is not in the purview of our discussion largely today, because for competition and for regulation, we have something like Competition Commission of India, which is a specific body taking care of market regulation. So this is not the disputes and their settlements that we would talk of. This is simply about market regulation, right? Now, to understand the emerging concepts of dispute settlement, we also have to look into the kinds of reliefs that practically are available. So the reliefs that we have in intellectual property laws, they are per se broadly divided into two categories. One are the criminal remedies in the form of imprisonments and fines, and the other are the civil remedies that we have. So talking of intellectual properties and these two remedies, out of these two also, the largely resorted to remedies are the civil remedies. I'll tell you how this discussion on remedies is important towards the end when we come to the emerging mechanisms. So criminal remedies, as I've said, include imprisonment and fines. Civil remedies include injunctions, damages, or accounts of profits, orders requiring a party to deliver up the infringing goods, or order for the destruction of the goods themselves. Now, when you look at these two broad categories, which is the criminal remedies and the civil remedies, out of these two, as I say, civil remedies are the ones that are largely resorted to, because this is all about business and economics. You might not get the monetary return for your satisfaction from an infringer when you send the other person to jail or the state takes some fine from them. Obviously, to deter it, it's obviously a good remedy that we have. And also it's there because TRIPS had mandated it to be there. So TRIPS is the WTO's agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property. It clearly said so that specifically for copyrights, that is copyright piracy, or for trademark infringement, that is counterfeiting, we have to have criminal remedies in place. You may have it for other IPs also, but TRIPS wants every member nation to have it at least for these two things. Apart from this, the civil remedies, the most resorted to remedies, they prove to be more effective for the satisfaction of an IP holder. Because you would at least get the monetary return back of what you've lost because of infringement in the form of damages or accounts of profits. Also, you can have injunctions, which are basically the restraining orders that you can stop the other person from infringing upon your IP. So this is a more satisfying remedy that you have compared to the criminal remedies. And also primarily because the purpose of both the remedies is different. Criminal remedies serve as a deterrent, and civil remedies, they're basically to put you back in a position as if no infringement had happened. So you get your money back, that's it. However, TRIPS also provides for these other two remedies that I've mentioned here. One is border measures. Now, border measures are largely for the international possibility of infringement, wherein the role of customs is brought in. So I'm not even going there, which is not of relevance for us. The last bullet that I have, I've specifically mentioned it here because apart from these systems that are in place to offer you a relief, that you go to a court in the criminal hierarchy to have a relief, or you go to a civil court or you go to the customs, there are other new emerging ways in which you can get some sort of relief. So this relief is to be seen largely in the light of new emerging areas that help you find some relief, which is in the form of arbitration, or even there is something known as expedited arbitration, there is mediation, and there is expert determination. And these are largely 4 options that are now made available to you through WIPO. So WIPO is the World Intellectual Property Organization. It is providing you an option to settle disputes through these mechanisms, primarily because of the reason that when there are international IP disputes between individual parties, we are not talking of India versus China or India versus US. It's not an international state dispute. We are talking of individual party disputes that WIPO helps you settle through its specific center dedicated for this purpose. Now, one can say that this is about the international disputes. How are we dealing with it here when we are talking of the emerging dispute settlement mechanisms? Can these be applied to the Indian scenario? Can we have something like arbitration for a domestic dispute between 2 Indian parties? So this is something that we shall look into, and how this may be a good alternative, and how in certain senses this is a very problematic area that one would never ever want to go there. However, it's emerging and is being looked into even by the Indian courts. Whether intellectual property disputes can be subjected to arbitration or not, whether we can go for things like mediation and expert determination. I'll talk of it in brief, what these basically mean and how WIPO is administering it. Right? Now, the primary 2 branches that we have in India, when we talk of the settlement mechanisms that India has to offer to its people, we have largely 3 categories of systems that I would say. One is your system of having something called as civil courts. One is the hierarchy of criminal courts that we have separately. And the third category that I generally mention to my students also, this is regarding the specialized agencies, bodies, authorities, or tribunals who have their very specific area of expertise and they deal with very specific kinds of matters, having exclusive jurisdiction over the matters. Right? So we are dealing with 2 things that are prescribed for in the intellectual property laws. For example, when we talk of criminal remedies, as I told you, TRIPS mandates is largely for trademarks and copyrights that had to be there if we are a WTO member. And we have to make our law TRIPS compliant, for which 10 years were given to us, which we've done definitely. Apart from that, member nations were open to include any such sort of remedy in other intellectual property legislations also. So I would not go in detail of these sections and acts and everything, just that we've gone TRIPS plus here. So we have it for what TRIPS says, but we've gone ahead. So we have criminal remedies prescribed for even under the other acts with regard to intellectual property, which are your geographical indications, your plant varieties, semiconductor integrated circuit layout designs. And when I talk of patents, I would not say there are criminal remedies per se, that in case of infringement, you get a criminal remedy relief in the court of law. But when you look at Patents Act, it has an entire chapter on penalties. So this is about manipulation of documents, falsification, not disclosing the name of the true and first inventor. So these are other remedies that are there. However, an element of the criminality or the criminal system has been incorporated, but it's not a criminal remedy in the form of a relief for infringement. So this is one dispute settlement mechanism, I would say, that you have, that you go to a criminal court and get it settled. One thing. Now, when we look at the civil remedies, they have to be there in all IP legislations, for sure, because this is again mandated by the TRIPS agreement. So the Trademarks Act, the Copyright Act, the Patents Act, all these laws, they largely have civil remedies very clearly prescribed for. And these civil remedies, as we've discussed, are primarily remedies that people resort to. And out of the number of remedies that we've so far spoken of, they also are very restricted in a sense that any person who claims that his intellectual property has been infringed, he would largely go for things like injunctions and damages. And when the profits earned by the infringer are more than the damages that have happened to you, then you rather go and ask for accounts of profits that owing to infringement, the infringer has been able to earn so and so amount. So this is the second kind of a dispute settlement mechanism that is in place, that you go to a civil court to obtain a certain remedy. Fine. Now, when you look at the various kinds of disputes that we've discussed, what would parties want? So there is a civil mechanism in place, there is a criminal mechanism in place. And for international disputes or probability of infringement matters can also be taken care of by the custom authorities. And there are specific regulations there also, but their jurisdiction is limited in the sense that custom authorities are not necessarily expert in the areas of IP. So they deal largely again with copyright and trademark matters, where infringement can be identified through a sole examination of the allegedly infringing goods. Patents was also earlier included, but because of the technicality involved therein, patent infringement at international borders has been brought out of the authority or jurisdiction of the custom authorities. So when now we look at what all mechanisms we have, we first need to understand the desires of the parties. And to begin with, there might be multiple intentions that parties have. At times, parties may enter into IP disputes in courts for various purposes, which may not only include that you honestly and genuinely want a remedy. It may also be to harass the other party. For example, when I challenge the validity of an X person's patent in a court, I know that it has been granted through a certain procedure, and I know that I'm deliberately and intentionally entering into this kind of a infringement litigation where I might even lose. So these are huge business companies entering into tactics of harassing the other party. Now, this is not something that we genuinely look at when we talk of parties wanting to engage into litigation, because it's a troublesome and also cost-taking, time-taking, effort-taking business. Not parties generally would want to have an entry into this sort of a long, prolonged dispute. So what do parties want? Why are they talking of dispute settlements? Why do they want to go to courts? The primary reason is that when there's a genuine party having an intellectual property with him, he would definitely want others to stop infringement. And there's a lot of money that goes in identifying infringers also. So if you look at these big companies like Coca-Cola, or you may talk of company like Wipro, Microsoft, Facebook, these people have their specific IP teams who are only working on identifying infringers. Companies like Apple, it has recently been sued for a certain technology that is using in the the FaceTime application. So they continuously are stuck in the business of defending themselves and also suing others. So there is this IP infringement search team that works. So you identify infringers and you do the very most important thing for which you have obtained a patent or a trademark or a GI. You go ahead and you restrict the other person from doing so. So this is a relief that you are asking from the courts to primarily have an enforcement of the rights that you have in the name of these IPs, and also to establish that you are the exclusive person using it. So this is basically when you go to the courts to have a relief in order to continue holding your market monopoly, that you will not tolerate or bear any other person interfering in your area. The second is to receive a damage so as to undo the loss that has happened to you. So you want to establish your position, you want to identify infringers, and you also want that if any damage has happened to you because of the infringement, you are able to recover it back. So that at the end of the dispute, there is nothing left to be balanced out. You have got what was due to you. The third thing here is that you need to teach a lesson to the infringer and also to the prospective infringers. So this is the purpose of deterrence, which we relate to the criminal remedies that we have. So you want to teach them a lesson that, see, this person was an infringer. We went to the court. We've got a remedy against him. And if others also try and infringe upon my IP, this would be your same fate, your same consequence. Another important reason why a number of big companies they enter into IP litigation is that they want to gain market recognition and attention. So even if there's a tiny iota of infringement happening anywhere, which will not necessarily be of any loss to you, even in those circumstances, people go around suing people. Excuse me. So what you're trying to basically do here is that you are getting into infringement to establish that you're a right holder. And when you establish that you're a right holder, you strengthen your position in the market. How it happens? When the companies and their intellectual properties are being valued, and there has been a number of positive enforcement of intellectual property rights in the past, this strengthens the IP. This makes the IP stronger. And therefore, when you value it, the value is generally higher. For example, if you look at Bata today, if Bata has won 20 trademark infringement cases in the past, it first of all is a well-recognized trademark, a well-known trademark in the legal sense, the terms that we use. If Bata has had 20 successful past litigations, when Bata sits to value itself or its IP, it will automatically have an increased valuation because of the positive enforcements. Which leads us to the next factor here, that is to strengthen your IP basically. So your IP strength, why I'm saying IP strength? Because your IP already has a strength because it's a recognized intellectual property through the statute. So you have a patent, you have a trademark, a registered trademark is what I'm talking of. You have a copyright, you have a registered GI. It already has some strength because of which you have the protection. You further strengthen it by entering into these litigations. At times, you also enter into disputes so as to compel other parties to agree to your terms. This generally happens between parties who know each other. There are contractual relations and there is something that you want the other party to be compelled to. For example, when you license out something to the other party and this other party, let's say, continues using that IP even after the expiry of the granted license, you may compel this party to first of all either stop using your IP because the license is over, or secondly to enter into an extended agreement with greater amount of royalty. That either you give me more royalty or I sue you for infringement simply because the license term is now over. So this is how patent litigation works. But we also need to look into another aspect which takes us to the emerging trends, which is that these days parties who are genuine IP holders and genuinely want redressal, they are not interested in engaging into any sort of prolonged litigation. They want quick disposal or they're even ready for mutual settlements. They want to save their time and money because IP litigation involves a lot of money. Your counsels in IP litigation, they generally charge really high amounts. And also they want to peacefully enjoy their IP rights without unnecessarily being involved in litigation. So that is why I've highlighted these last 3 bullets in bold, because this is what takes us to the new mechanisms, right? Now we talk about the emerging settlement mechanisms. The first thing that we are clear about, I believe, that we have a mechanism in place already, the civil and criminal remedies that you want. But as we all say that with regard to the litigations that go on, these go on for years and years. You would not expect that you go to the court today and you will have a decision by, let's say, 6 months or 1 year or 2 years. It takes a lot of time. Because of which we have something like the alternate dispute redressal mechanism that has evolved over time. So there are things like arbitration, mediation, conciliation, negotiation, good offices. So these are things that have already evolved. This also is not something that we can call new or emerging areas of dispute settlement, but they are new to intellectual property disputes, and therefore they are important. So resorting to emerging mechanisms such as ADRs, they may help in serving the rights of IP holders better, such that they can do away with the limitations of the ordinary litigation procedure that may have to resort to in the present times, with the present structure that we have. So they would have to end up choosing either of the 2 options. Either the civil remedies or the criminal remedies, they'll have to approach the courts or the police officers, either of these. Therefore, with the traditional limitations that we see that are there in the judicial structure right now, for example, we see that it takes time, it involves money, and primarily your intellectual properties are limited in time. You do not have them forever. Like there are exceptions to this also. For example, trademarks. So you can sit and wait for the litigation to end. There's nothing that you're losing on to. But when you look at things like intellectual property in the form of patents, or when you look at designs, they have a very limited timeline or lifetime. So patents is granted for 20 years, out of which also some duration is spent or wasted in procuring the patent in the first place. The patent offices, they take 3, 4 or 5 years in granting the patent itself, which is all wasted. So the practical economic life comes out to be 14, 15 years, that's it. And out of which also you want to be engaged into a litigation for 5 or 6 or 10 years, that makes practically no sense. And for such time limited intellectual properties, we must have some alternate mechanism available. So primarily this takes me to the concepts or mechanisms that have been developed by WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and we'll borrow that from the international sphere into the domestic sphere, how we can use it in India and what have the court so far said about it. So when you look at WIPO, it largely has 4 mechanisms. One is arbitration, the other is expedited arbitration, which is arbitration further in a more speedier manner. You have something like mediation, and then you have something called as expert determination. So arbitration, as we simply know, is referring the matter to an arbitral tribunal, wherein the arbitral tribunal would preside over the proceedings and the parties will put across their points. Now in arbitration, this is more like a very formal and structured way of getting settled, but it's treated as an alternate mechanism because there would be arbitrators appointed to specifically deal with your matter. So you can have a meeting with them every day or every week as compared to what happens in ordinary courts. So you may have a date coming in the next month or the next to next month, and if the other party wants, even after 3 months. But in arbitration, the parties first of all come to a common point that they want to settle a dispute. And that is when the matter goes for arbitration. You appoint a specialized person to deal with these matters, which may not always necessarily be in the matter when a certain matter comes before a judge in a court. So they themselves have to struggle with finding out the peculiarities and actually deciding upon it, because they may not necessarily be experts in IP, but your arbitrator definitely can be. It helps you with saving time. I would not say costs, because arbitration also would involve payment of fee to the arbitrator, arranging for a place where you would want to have arbitration. So these things also involve some cost. However, it gives you at least a hope or a possibility that the matter would be resolved in a quicker manner as compared to the lost hope that is generally there in litigations. So this is how arbitration serves the purpose a bit better, if not perfectly a better alternative option. WIPO also has this arbitration mechanism, and the good thing about WIPO is that it technically is a center working only and only for dispute settlement and is not charging any money for it, apart from simple administrative costs such as the fee of the arbitrator. So apart from this, there is no other cost that they take, and also the costs are reduced. If you go to the WIPO center in Geneva and have a arbitration session or a meeting in their own office, so infrastructure cost already goes down. So this is how WIPO is trying and promoting arbitration as a dispute settlement mechanism. And parallelly, they have something called as expedited arbitration. Expedited arbitration, as the word suggests, is something that is a speedier redressal or a speedier relief or a speedier conclusion of the matter that you would have. Because if, let's say, it's a person who's into trademark dispute with someone and you go for simple arbitration, you have enough time that you can wait, even if the matter gets decided in 2 months or 3 months. But if you are limited in time, in the sense you are a patent holder in the 17th year of your patent life, you cannot wait. You would want the dispute to be redressed at the earliest, because firstly, your patent life is about to expire. Secondly, You cannot continue holding prolonged communications and discussions over what is to be done. So you have a concept like expedited arbitration. So you have a formal alternate option, and that too in a speedier manner as compared to the ordinary arbitration. The third option that they have come up with is mediation, which is the most largely resorted to option. Why I say it's more resorted to compared to arbitration and expedited arbitration? Because it is more of an informal setting as compared to arbitration. Because arbitration is a manner of dispute redressal where you submit to the arbitrator your dispute, and then you also agree to be bound by his decision. So you can view at it like an alternate court. Just say, for example, the judge's judgment would be binding on you, the arbitrator's award would be equally binding on you, which is not the case in mediation. When you go for mediation, you only agree that we're trying and settling this mutually. Everything is largely decided, communicated by the parties only, and they figure out the best alternative option for themselves. The mediator only facilitates this mediation. He may also propose certain solutions to your problems. He may tell you how one party may compromise against the demand of the other party and what you may get in return additionally. So they facilitate the process and you come to a conclusion. This process is not binding unless and until you have signed an agreement saying that this would be binding. And also for mediation, you are only trying and exploring options. If it does not work out, you can leave the table in between. You're not bound to continue mediating. And therefore, mediation is seen as a more attractive and appropriate option. And WIPO has actually settled disputes with regard to IP through mediation. But the primary reason why I cannot give you examples of it is WIPO maintains total confidentiality. They do not disclose the names of parties. There are certain presentations or PPTs available on their website where they say party X was in dispute with party Y with regard to a certain license agreement. So confidentiality is another important thing that is a very, very important thing that comes from these alternate dispute redressal mechanisms. But I would say that for intellectual property disputes, confidentiality is rather something that parties don't look for, especially when it's an IP holder trying and suing the other party. Being confident of the IP that they have, they would rather want to go for litigation, publicize it, that X company has sued Y company for so and so reasons, relating to IP obviously. So this gives you publicity, it brings you limelight, and if positively enforced, it adds on to your value and your IP strength. So when we talk of IP, confidentiality per se may not necessarily be something that parties are looking for, but it's an added feature. Parties who have certain restrictions, they have an option of maintaining confidentiality. The last thing that WIPO has come up with is the expert determination, that you refer the matter to an expert, take his opinion and see if you're okay with the opinion or not. So these are largely the 4 things that WIPO has come up with and has specific rules prescribed for each of them. So specific arbitration rules, specific expedited arbitration rules, specific mediation rules, and specific expert determination rules. The fee for each of these purposes has also been prescribed, which is compared to the litigation charges in the charts that they have on their website, which clearly says that it's almost 1/10 of the cost compared to what you would otherwise incur through a litigation. So cost cutting is the most advantageous feature or factor that you have here. Fine. So these are the new emerging settlement mechanisms. Now, borrowing all of this from WIPO and fixing it into the Indian scenario is what is important for us. When there are IP disputes in India, can we refer these matters to arbitration? Or can we refer these matters for mediation? The answer to it cannot be given in clarity in a yes or no. There are differing opinions of differing high courts, though the Supreme Court has laid down clear tests as to what is arbitrable and what is not. The title of this slide clearly talks of arbitration primarily, because for arbitration, we have a specific law, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. So we have to also look into the provisions of that act, whether we can go ahead with it or not. And primarily, we need to look at the source of these ADRs, which is section 89 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Now, that section simply says that if it appears to the court that the parties are willing to settle this particular dispute amicably and there is a scope of possible resolution, the courts can forward such matters to either arbitration or conciliation, mediation, or if the matter permits, to Lok Adalats. This is precisely the gist of Section 89. Now for arbitration, for the Act, as I said, that there are certain limitations and restrictions that the Act also has. There has to be an arbitration agreement for arbitration to actually happen, or at least an arbitration clause in the arbitration agreement. Now, when I say that I want to sue an X party for infringement, it's not going to be as simple because that X party may not necessarily have been known to me. I may not have had any contractual relations with this party. There is no contract that is signed between the two of us, and therefore no arbitration clause possible. So when I want to sue someone for infringement, how do I go for arbitration? Now in India and the Act that we have, there's a problem with regard to this limitation. And this problem has been done away by WIPO. So WIPO has been very smart in drafting its arbitration rules. It says that, let's say it's a matter of infringement and you don't know each other. The parties are unaware of each other. They only know that one is an IP holder and the other is an infringer. You can now enter into an arbitration agreement. There's an arbitration clause that they have drafted in multiple languages depending on the suitability of the parties. So you simply copy and paste that on a piece of paper and sign it that you want to submit the dispute to arbitration. So very beautifully, they've chalked out a relief to it, how you do it. But now when we look at the Indian situation and see how far we can go for arbitration and how it's convenient to enter into other alternatives like mediation and everything. So arbitration per se is something which is regulated by law, and therefore not everything can be arbitrable. So there are limitations on it. Now, when we talk of intellectual property disputes also, there is no specific mention of intellectual property disputes per se in the law relating to dispute resolution anywhere. However, the two judgments that you see here, the Booz Allen and Hamilton versus SBI and Ayasamy versus Paramasivam, these two judgments, they have looked into the question of arbitrability of disputes generally. So here, these judgments, they do not necessarily relate to IP disputes. They've given you a simple understanding of what is arbitrable and what is not arbitrable. To conclude or to simply draw inferences from this, Supreme Court, I would not say had settled it as early as it could. It's just recently in 2016 that they've also come out with another test. They have laid down a dual test for checking whether something is arbitrable or not. So we look at it in the light of intellectual property disputes and we go through these two tests to conclude what is arbitrable and what is not. So the general rule is that arbitrability of any dispute, it depends on the country's public policy. That is the law that they have in place already. So do we see a clear bar in the Arbitration Act for IP disputes to be subjected to arbitration? The answer is no. So there's a possibility that we see. And then we apply these two tests to draw inferences. So the first test is disputes involving the adjudication of rights in rem as opposed to actions in personam are not arbitrable. So here we have to draw a distinction between rights in rem and rights in personam. Rights in rem are simply rights that one has against the entire world. So when I say I have a patent, I have it against all. And they're territorial in nature, so I will talk only of India. So if I have a patent registered in India, I have it registered in my name and I can stop anybody and everybody in India from using that patent or copying that invention of mine without my permission, of course. But when we talk of right in personams, they are person-to-person disputes. So when I say I have a licensee, I gave him a license for 3 years, but he's continuing to use it for further years. Now, if this kind of a dispute arises, this is a dispute arising out of a contract, first of all. Here, I am not claiming anything that the relief in such a matter would affect everybody around in India. It would only be a party-to-party dispute where a personalized option of redressal can be chalked out, definitely. So this is one test. If it is a right in rem, you cannot have arbitration, but if it is a right in personam against one individual person, you can go ahead with arbitration. But there are peculiarities attached here with a lot of limitations that I'll just discuss. The second test here is that disputes arising out of a special statute, which are specially to be subjected to the exclusive jurisdiction of courts or forums or tribunals, they are not to be arbitrable. What they are trying to simply say is that when there is a law that says that you have a patent or a trademark or a copyright or a GI or a design, it's a statutorily vested right, which has statutory remedies attached to it. And it very clearly says, where do you get these remedies from? You get it from the courts, the civil or the criminal courts, whatever it may be. So there's a specific statutory right for which the forum is fixed. Then how do you go about having dispute settlement through arbitration? Now, these tests help us conclude two primary things with respect to arbitrability of intellectual property disputes. One is that matters relating to validity and enforcement of intellectual property rights, they are not arbitrable. Why? Because they are statute granted. There's a proper authority or a court to fix these issues, and you would want remedies from the court only. For example, when we talk of injunctions, damages, orders for destruction, these are not things that an arbitrator can give to you. So since you want judicial remedies from the judicial forums fixed for it, you cannot go for arbitration. The second thing is here that the dispute has to be between individual parties and not some decision or a judgment that would ultimately operate against the rest of the world and in your favor. These kinds of decisions cannot come from arbitrators. They will only come from courts. For example, a court holding that your patent is valid. This kind of a decision can come only from court, not from an arbitrator who is not authorized to inquire into the question of validity of a patent. However, when we have contractual disputes like licenses, such matters can definitely go to an arbitrator for reconciliation or settlement, because these are commercial transaction-based disputes and can be subjected to arbitration. Now, when we look at intellectual property, there are again varying opinions of courts here when we talk of the high courts. So Delhi High Court, Bombay High Court, they've had different opinions. Now, there are these two cases that are telling you what is not arbitrable in IP. And there are two cases further that I've cited here, which says that there are things that are arbitrable in IP. So Mundi Pharma case and the sale case, they simply tell you that when you have statutory infringement into question, you say you have an IP and you say that the other is infringer. Here, your validity may also be called into question. For example, when a patent holder sues somebody for infringement, this somebody can clearly come up and say, man, your patent is not valid. So a challenge to validity may be raised. When such are the circumstances and the judgment again will operate in rem, this cannot be subjected to arbitration. And also the sale case reaffirmed the same thing, to which a slight wind of change was seen when you look at the Eros and the Eurokids case, where the courts have spoken of arbitration in a very, very enlightening manner, where the courts say that you cannot simply say that IP disputes are inarbitrable. There cannot be a blanket bar over it because the nature of disputes differ. And that is why in my initial 2-3 slides itself, I was discussing about the kinds of disputes that may be there. So when it's a question of infringement, validity, or passing off, which come from the statute, you go to the court. But when there's any dispute coming out of a contract, an agreement, an ex-licensee of yours, maybe the contract is over, but then he became your licensee through a contract that he had access to your IP. Such disputes can definitely be arbitrable, and allowing this to happen will rather reduce the burdens of the court. When that is the case, you should not impose an absolute bar or a ban, though every dispute may have a question of validity involved therein, till the time the matter can be decided to come to a settlement, a final solution. Such matters where mutual agreement between parties is possible, they shall be allowed for arbitration. So to better explain this, I'll just give you an example. For example, an X person who was a patentee, he goes to Y person and discloses the invention and wants him to commercially exploit it. For example, I have a patent, but I don't have the infrastructure or financial capability to commercially exploit it. So I give this right to my licensee. Now I will not meet one person and decide, fine, you can take this license. I will try and meet few people, see which is the best option for me. Should I give one exclusive license? Should I give two non-exclusive licenses? Should I give a license to a person in North, one in South, one in East and in West, so that my invention is worked throughout the territory of India? I'll explore options. And for this, I may have to go and meet many people. I may have to disclose my invention to many people, though I may even get a non-disclosure agreement signed with them initially. My invention gets disclosed. And this kind of a dispute has actually been settled by the WIPO Arbitration and Mediation Center, when an invention and its workability commercially was discussed with one of the parties, but they did not actually end up entering into a license. So the parties could not mutually come to an agreement of entering into a license. However, this person with whom the entire negotiation happened, this person went ahead to use this invention and started manufacturing the underlying invention. So when this is the kind of dispute, you are not saying per se that he is simply an infringer. You are saying that he was my prospective licensee to whom the invention was disclosed, and I'm still willing to give him a license. I'm not saying that he's an infringer. Let's just mutually settle this. So the parties can come on a table, subject such a dispute to arbitration or mediation, and a mutual settlement can be arrived at where you now agree to enter into a license. And for the past earnings that have happened, you pay a certain fixed royalty to the person. So through such settlement mechanisms, you need not necessarily resort to court options. You were otherwise also looking for a licensee. There's a person who set up the infrastructure and is already manufacturing. So rather than exploring other options going here and there, you better talk to him if he's willing to. So for past alleged infringement that he's done, he'll agree to pay you royalty. And for future events and for future sales, he will become your licensee and pay you the agreed reasonable royalty. So this is how it entirely works. You can definitely subject your disputes to these ADR mechanisms. Now, these are simply the ones that were prescribed and used by WIPO, the Arbitration and Mediation Center of WIPO. There is a very interesting thing that has happened in India and is appreciated. Now, this basically emerged in California, and courts there were using this. This is something that has now also been brought to India, and there's just one case where the Bombay High Court used it. This was the Baba Masala Company case, where the Bombay High Court referred the matter before it could take up the infringement matter on merits. This was a trademark dispute where the trademark holder was agreeable to license it out to the other party. So the court said that instead of you entering into litigation and spoiling your terms, let's just refer this matter for early neutral evaluation. That if you enter into a litigation, you will definitely not be in cordial terms in future if one party wins and the other loses. And the idea is that you're willing to license it out and the other is already using a similar trademark. So why not you explore an option of early neutral evaluation? That you both meet over a table to a common expert that you can, and you tell him your side of the story. And let this person evaluate neutrally in the early stages itself as to what would be the fate of this litigation. Would it be fruitful? Is it a good idea to proceed with this litigation? Or is there a scope that you settle it outside? So this is a new kind of a middle way that has come up. So what generally courts so far are doing, they have a matter. Section 89 is applied if it's a civil matter, and the matter is sent for arbitration or mediation or whatever other ADR mechanism that can be referred to. Now the courts have brought in a middle ground here, that you have come to the court for sure. Before the court takes the matter up on merit, we send you for early neutral evaluation. You balance the ways, the pros and cons of the possible litigation, how it would basically end. And then you decide whether you want to proceed with litigation or not. Because this early neutral evaluation may actually guide away or guide you towards the ADRs that please don't proceed with the matter in court. It's better that you go ahead and you settle this dispute mutually. So this is a middle new way where an expert guides you that if you proceed with litigation, you may fail, so don't go there. Or if you go there, it will take time, and till that time, let's say your IP expires, don't go there. So such kind of an early stage guidance is being provided to parties. Now, this is a very ignored thing, I would say. It happened in 2010 and so far has not been used again. So this is something that can definitely be a new emerging dispute settlement mechanism. So these are primarily concerns that relate to dispute settlements and how ADRs can be used for settling IP disputes. However, there are certain limitations, a few of which I've already discussed during explaining various things that I've covered so far. So the idea here is that where there's a specific forum, like civil courts or criminal courts or police officers, like there are specific provisions which also empower the police officers to take cognizance of certain matters and proceed with the criminal matter. So when there are agencies, forums, or courts specifically prescribed, you cannot go for such alternate mechanisms. And it's largely applicable in cases where parties want civil remedies or a probable solution, I would say. When I've written civil remedies here, this is because it's CPC referring matters for ADR, and it's generally in those matters that an alternate mechanism may be resorted to. Because the remedy that you want in a criminal matter, definitely something that you cannot try and find a way through the ADR mechanisms. You cannot come to a mutual settlement that fine, you are going to agree to the jail, right? This kind of an agreement cannot be entered into. That will happen only through courts. Also, which we've already discussed, only when disputes are disputes in personam can you go for arbitration, mediation, negotiation also for that matter may be used. These kinds of things can happen only when it's a party-to-party dispute and when the decision will operate only in favor of one party and against the other party, and the rest of the nation may not necessarily be affected by it, right? Also, when you want some other remedies apart from these civil judicial remedies, such as entering into an agreement, like the example that I just discussed. So when it's just that kind of a settlement that you want, then obviously ADRs are the best way to resort to. Also, the parties have to be in cordial terms. Parties who've constantly been in a state of conflict have always gone to courts, want nothing but court litigation so that a better assertive decision is brought against one. There is no possibility of mutual settlement, and rather when you even try that let's settle it mutually, it might not always be easy to arrive at the settlement. This would simply be a wastage of time, and therefore it's a limitation on these alternative mechanisms. And also it flows from the very discussed factor that the parties should have an intention to continue cohabiting. The earlier thing that I've discussed is about their past, that they've been in constant conflict. What I'm saying here is that the parties intend to hold cordial relationship with each other, and that is when you opt for such methods. If you're willing to compromise on the cordial nature, and if you think you have a decent enough IP, a strong IP, that your validity will not be called into question, you straight away go to the court, there's no harm. But you need to have the time, you need to have some patience, you need to have a lot of money in your pocket, and a lot of time with your IP itself that you may explore court litigation. And as we go generally about how ADR is better than litigation, the same benefits or the same pros would work here also in IP matters, because they're nothing different from ordinary civil disputes. These are like traditional properties, however intangible, over which you have disputes like you may have in case of any other tangible property. So there's no new kind of a benefit or a new kind of a drawback that you have. It's all just common and the same. Right? So this is all what I had to discuss with regard to the emerging techniques or the emerging ways how IP disputes may be settled. Now I would hand it over to the moderators, please.
It was a very thorough and informative session. We have some questions here.
Yeah, sure.
What, according to you, are the current challenges in the field of intellectual property rights or with respect to settling intellectual property disputes?
With
I
respect
request
to
current challenge.
Kanika for a minute. I request Amisha to kindly come on mode and then ask the question.
All right. Hello.
yes.
Yes, ma'am. So, what, according to you, are the current challenges in the field of intellectual property rights or with respect to settling intellectual property disputes?
See, with respect to intellectual property rights generally and the challenges that are coming up, there are various fields relating to intellectual property that are in debate. They are all under research, and things like artificial intelligence, things like green technology, licensing forever has been a major issue with IP. Disclosure requirements in patents have always been a problem. But then when I talk of emerging disputes, I would say even disputes that have settled are still pending. Like we all know of the Novartis judgment, which relates to Section 3D. But US and EU, they've been in constant criticism of India. And they simply say that you want to promote generics, the pharmaceuticals in your country, and therefore you have such provisions herein. You need to refine it, you need to clarify it. So IP is something with which I cannot, literally list down things. Now, if you look at laws, the updation of laws is something that is required. There's a lot of ambiguity, I would say, in the copyright law that has been amended, but still a lot needs refinement. There are things that are not paid attention to. If you look at the music industry, you look at these societies who are working for licensing out these works like IPRS and everything, there's a lot of chaos going on there. The performers say that we're not getting our dues. The entire royalty goes to the producers. So these are kind of concerns that are ever emerging and everlasting, and I don't think we probably have any solution to them in the near future. And with regard to your second aspect of the question, when we talk of dispute settlements, I personally feel that with regard to IP disputes, one thing that has to be looked into is the expertness or the technical expertise that the judges have in the area of IP. That needs to be worked upon. So you may have Supreme Court giving decisions, but then they themselves are taking so much of time in comprehending what actually the dispute is about. There are judgments that are definitely to be criticized and a lot to be worked on. Dispute settlement mechanism, we have remedies coming up. Like the ones that I've just discussed, one primarily ignored area I would say is the early neutral evaluation. That will really help in lessening the burden of the court and in parties to go to these other alternative mechanisms that are there.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Another question which is quite related to the questions that I just asked is, according to you, does the Indian intellectual property laws need any amendment to be able to better address the current challenges in the field of IPR?
See, that is what
there any need
to an extent. I would definitely say yes. Like if you look at the copyright law clearly has a major limitation to it, because it says that once you've published your work, then is when your term of copyright is get fixed as such. What about unpublished works? There's no clarity. So you draw in inferences, you go back to Berne Convention, you go back to TRIPS, you try and identify certain provisions that talk of copyright in unpublished works. So there's no clarity on what shall be the duration of copyright protection of unpublished works. So this is like copyrights. I'm giving just examples. There are many, many things that need clarity. Now, if you look at the trademark law, what is our exhaustion policy? We have it only through judgments. Why do you not write it down in law? You look at patents. Section 3D looks like a very beautiful provision trying to restrict evergreening, but practically it is restricting in incremental innovation. So every law, I think, and also one thing that I would say, there are people who have worked under me for their LLM dissertations. And last academic year, there were 8 people working on geographical indications. And there are major problems with geographical indication law that they've identified. Poor implementation, no benefit to artisans. They don't even know of what GI is. They are selling something like Fulkari Dupatta, but they don't know what GI protection it has. They have no idea. Kolhapuri chappal is something that is sold, like I am in Jodhpur right now, I see Kolhapuri chappals being sold here, and at a price which is just negligible. They are not aware of the fact that it is GI protected, and we can quote a higher price for it and earn from it. So this knowledge is something that is totally lacking. And for IPs like semiconductor integrated circuits, plant varieties, and how biodiversity is to be brought in, these are totally unacknowledged areas. Even students who are done with their graduation, they've studied a compulsory paper on IPR. I see them coming here in LLM having no idea about these things. So imparting knowledge, spreading awareness, ये बहुत general चीजें लगती हैं कि ये तो सभी बोलते हैं, but that's a major problem with IP, I would say.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. One last question,
Yes,
which is suggested by one of our law interns. What, according to you, is the most cost-effective mechanism in settling intellectual property disputes?
I would personally say it's early neutral evaluation followed by mediation. Because mediation gives you a lot of free space to work, a lot of informal space to discuss, and also to leave the bench if things don't work out your way. So that's always a better option.
Okay. Does anyone has any other question? Any other question?
Kanika, I wanted to ask one thing.
Yes.
On the one hand, you have asked or you have stated that this arbitration is a cost-effective mechanism if we go in the IPR. But in my purview, in the present scenario, the arbitration is now becoming much of cost expensive rather being cost effective, because the schedule of the arbitration says a very high fees. So generally, if we calculate the court fees and the fees of the lawyer, it does not become so that it cross the schedule which has been given in the Arbitration Act. So to some extent, I think you also be in consonance with us with regard to the same, that we really not finding the arbitration as a cost effective, rather it is a cost expensive mechanism these days. So what in IP disputes, how there is a special reference with regard to the arbitration?
So I would not say that it's entirely cost cutting, because here at times the cost paid to the arbitrators is also dependent on their expertise in the area. So the cost parallelly definitely would go up, but the only benefit is that if you're able to wind up your dispute settlement in a quick time, that there is a possibility of early settlement, then it might be a good option that fine, you're paying a bit more, but you're getting a redressal in quick time. Then you may go for it. That is why I said when she asked me about the best alternative that you have, I would never ever suggest arbitration. There is money that would go in, there is time that would go in, and there again has to be a very formal communication with the arbitrator compared to what happens in mediation. So mediation, I think, is one good way out as compared to even arbitration, for that matter, expedited arbitration. Now, if we look at the WIPO schedule, expedited arbitration is much more expensive than simple arbitration. Yeah. So I agree with you on that, definitely. It's not entirely cost cutting, I would say. It's only to say it's alternate, it's something new, something attractive. You may send your matters there, but only if you're willing to pay more for less time.
And rather, we should have expert mediators to be appointed with regard to the IP dispute resolution, because the normal mediators who have been dealing with the normal civil disputes, in our view, they would not be able to settle the matters of the IP dispute unless and until there has been a special training which has been imparted to them.
Definitely, yes. This is an important consideration, because there is no point going for mediation then. Half of the time would go in explaining what you have at hand and what do you want the redressal for.
So if anyone else have any question, they may take up. And now I request Mohini to kindly come on the board and formally thank our today's speaker. Mohini, we cannot see you.
Sir, am I visible now?
Yeah, you are visible and you are audible.
Thank you, Kanika ma'am, to speak on such a vast topic and of immediate attention. The webinar was very candid and articulative. The webinar today was also very, very informative. Not only this, ma'am, by providing such output and law about the topic was of immense knowledge, and many would have got to know about the subject really, really well. Last but not the least, we would like to thank our viewers who were a part of with us today in our webinar. Ma'am, we would like to have more such informative sessions on the other subjects in future as well. Thank you, Nitesh sir, for giving me this opportunity to moderate the today's webinar with you and your esteemed organization. Over to you, Nitesh sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mohini, for this wonderful note of thanking from you. I would also like to thank my today's moderators, that is Amisha, Tiwari and Sanchita. One thing I would like to add, Kanika, here, you being from the same college, even the Sanchita who introduced you is also from our webs only. Okay. So it's a gathering of old days, and you see that the young guns are also coming up to shoot the heights.
Definitely, as we had more girls in our batch compared to boys. So I
Yeah,
can definitely make out how this is happening.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for the same, and we are looking forward for some more future informative webinars from you, Kanika. Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much, sir. This has been a great platform for me also to get in touch with few of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.